Shooting is complicated at a glance, but once you have the basics down, it becomes simple. In order to perform a shooting action against a target, first make sure your unit has sight of the target they want to shoot. Once again, that's the 120-degree arc originating from your unit's eye level. Position yourself at the eye level of your unit and see how much of the enemy unit you can see. If this sounds impossible, don't worry. You can grab a device called a Target Lock Laser Liner, online or in a local hobby shop, and just use that. This is because how much of your opponent you can see will affect how the attack goes. Being able to see more of your opponent will lower their defense pool, while being able to see less of them will lower your attack pool. Oh, right. There are weapons that have unique firing arcs, such as directly behind you or off to the side, but this will be listed next to the weapon name. Once you have your target in sight, break out the tape measure and check if the target is within range. Like I said in the unit sheet video, the minimum and maximum range of your weapon is listed in its stats. Also, don't forget the whole reloading thing. If the target is either under the minimum range or over the maximum range, it applies a penalty to that attack that we'll discuss in a minute. Also worth noting is that weapons within the explosive class can't be fired at an enemy that is less than their minimum range. You know, to avoid blowing yourself up. Now that you're ready to rock, we can start shooting. First off, check the weapon's shot stat. This is the number of dice your unit will roll when performing the action. If you remember from terminology, this is called the attack pool. The success of these attacks is determined by the amount of dice that meet or exceed the number listed in the weapon's accuracy stat. Any die that does not meet that number is considered a miss and is removed from the attack pool. No matter what modifiers are placed on this stat, a natural 6 is always a hit. This means that there is always a chance for you to hit. A roll that meets or exceeds the critical value of the weapon also deals structural damage to the unit it's attacking. This is determined by what is known as the critical table. We'll talk about that later when we go over close combat. You should also know that there are diminishing returns on multi-hit weapons. So for every shot past the third for a shooting weapon, a penalty is applied. On the fourth shot, your accuracy and critical stats are increased by 1, meaning that you must meet the number 1 greater than your normal accuracy stat. For the fifth, those stats are increased by 2. On the sixth shot, your accuracy is increased by 3 and you cannot score a critical hit. Now your opponent gets a chance to defend themselves. So your defense pool is actually determined by the unit's armor value listed on the unit sheet. The number of die listed is known as the defense pool. The number needed to be met or exceeded is listed in brackets. These are called blocks. Any that don't meet the armor value are dropped from the pool and considered fails. Once you've got both pools figured out, you just compare them and subtract the blocks from the attacks. Just remember that the defender always chooses which hits to block. If you have any attacks left over, then you move on to dealing damage. The damage dealt to integrity is the damage stat of the weapon multiplied by the number of remaining attacks. Seems simple enough at a glance. Let's talk about shields and defensive measures for a spell. If the defending unit has a shield and they can see the person shooting at them, they may use it to block. When they do so, they roll the number of dice listed on their shield stat and see how many meet the requirement for a block. Make sure you separate these dice from your normal armor pool. I'll tell you why in a second. You don't get a shield bonus if your shield loses all of its integrity or if you perform what is known as a shield break. Shield break ties into critical hits and the critical table, so we'll go over that with close combat. So I just told you to keep shield die separate from armor die, and that's because of energy shields. Energy shields and eye fields are shields designed to deflect weapons with the beam tag. They grant additional die depending on the grade of the shield. I'll throw the table up here so you can see it. In addition, they subvert what is known as penetrating strikes for weapons with the beam tag. We'll talk about penetration in a second. Speaking of penetrating, shields have their own separate health, which is reduced when they are used against a penetrating attack. The amount of integrity depends on the shield type, but it's usually typical to 1 more than the amount of dice that the shield rolls. So if your shield has 2 dice in its pool, it usually has an integrity of 3. Each time you try to block a penetrating hit with your shield, it loses 1 point of integrity. Alright, penetrating hits. Weapons with this P tag on them apply penetration to their attacks. These weapons are designed to fly right through armor and make light work of your enemies. To simulate this, there's a special table that applies to defense rolls when they are attacked by penetrating hits. This interaction is actually different depending on whether your group is using the 2.0 or 2.01 rule set, so I'll go over each of them. In 2.0, if you want to use your shield against a penetrating weapon, you first need to roll a shield check. It's simple. If you roll a 1 through 3, you don't get to use your shield against that attack. If you roll a 4 or higher, you get to use your shield as normal. As for defending against the actual attack, you need to roll equal to or greater than a certain number to be considered a block. A 2 or a 3 needs a 5 or greater to be blocked. A 4 or a 5 needs a 6 to be blocked, and an attack roll of a 6 cannot be blocked by regular armor or shields. If the penetrating weapon is a beam weapon, eye fields and beam shields can fare a bit better. A 2 or a 3 needs a 4 to be blocked, a 4 or a 5 needs a 5 to be blocked, and a 6 can be blocked by another 6. In the 2.01 rule set, you don't need to roll in order to use your shield against any penetration attacks as long as you can see the shooter. Also, only rolls of 4, 5, or 6 are counted as penetrating attack rolls, and rolls of 2 or 3 can just be blocked as normal. For regular armor and shields, in order to block a 4 or a 5, you need a 6 or greater, and a 6 cannot be blocked at all. Similar to before, eye fields and beam shielding can block a 4 or a 5 on a roll of 5 or greater, and can block a 6 with another 6. I talked about this already, but after you shoot your weapon, whether you hit or miss, you may need to reload it. Depending on the tag, it may take more or less time to do so. Before we wrap this up, let's go over the flowchart and modifiers that affect attackers and defenders. So as the action starts, the attacker decides on a normal or an aimed shot. They select their target and check distance and sight their unit has on the target. I mentioned before that how much of your opponent you can see will impact the shot. There are 3 states of vision that you should be familiar with for the purpose of shooting: unobstructed, in cover, and obstructed. A unit you can see that is unobstructed, meaning you can see about 67% or more of the unit, has their armor pool reduced by 1 die. A unit that is in cover, meaning that 1/3 to 2/3 of it can't be seen, receives no penalties or bonuses. And a unit that is obstructed, meaning that more than 2/3 of the unit can't be seen, reduces the number of shots fired at it by 1. This is actually ideal for dodging like single-hit rocket launchers and laser cannons. On the defender's side, they now check for defenses like shields or other options that might intercept the attack. Once that's done, both parties total up their modifiers and roll their respective attack or defense pools, and then compare the total hits and blocks. If the defense pool has enough valid blocks to cancel out all of the attacker's hits, the attack is blocked and the shooting action is a failure. If any of the hits are able to surpass the blocks, then you move on to the damage tallying. Before damage is actually dealt, the defender has the opportunity to declare a shield break to mitigate destruction. We'll talk more about this during damage and destruction when we go over close combat. If they don't, you simply move on to damage tallying. Like I said before, multiply the weapon's damage by the number of successful hits and then roll for any critical hits to see which parts you've damaged. So things that your attackers should watch out for. Arm damage level 1 or higher makes all of your weapon accuracy 5 or greater. If you are at a higher elevation than your target while shooting, you may re-roll a single failed shot. If you shoot from outside your target's sight radius, you may also re-roll a failed shot. If the target is obstructed, you lose 1 attack roll from your attack pool. Things defenders should watch out for. If you are unobstructed to the shooter, you lose 1 armor die from your defense pool. If the shooter has head damage, you may re-roll a single failed block. If you are outside of the shooter's weapon range, you gain an additional die to your defense pool. If you can see the person shooting at you and you have a shield, you may use that shield and add the dice to your defense pool. And that's shooting for you. It's easier done than said once you start playing. Next video we'll talk about ranged weapons, and I'll give you some tips on a few of them. See you then.